It's the 80s Experience on FM 88.5 KSBR with J.J. Buchanan. He's a multi-award winner, internationally renowned author, and singer-songwriter, Mr. Dan Hill. Dan, how are we doing this evening?
I'm doing great, thanks. How about you?
Wonderful, Dan. So I know you were born in Toronto, Canada, and you were listening. What were you listening to coming out of your family speakers when you were growing up back then?
I listened to whatever my parents listened to and instantly fell in love with their music. So Frank Sinatra was big on my parents' stereo, as was Sarah Vaughan, Ella Fitzgerald. So in a sense, my whole vocabulary was formed around the songs I memorized when I was 3 and 4 years of age.
At the age of about 14, you started writing your own songs, and how were you influenced to write your own songs at that point in time?
Well, I grew up in a family of writers. My dad had written books. My grandparents on both sides had written books. You know, I was always really good at writing essays and articles and even getting articles published in local newspapers for money. So, you know, once I started playing guitar at 11, it was just a matter of time until I stumbled onto writing songs. And once the dam opened at the age of 14, it just never closed.
By the time you were 17, you were playing coffee houses in and around town, and you were given the opportunity to write some songs for RCA Records. How did that all come about?
Well, actually, I sent a demo tape to RCA. A friend of mine in the neighborhood that had one of the earliest homemade studios. It was just a guitar voice demo, and RCA signed me to a recording deal on the spot when I was 18. So through that, I ended up meeting people like Harry Belafonte and Jose Feliciano. So as well as being a recording artist, those artists heard some of my songs and fell in love with my writing.
Wonderful. And in 1975, Dan, you recorded your first self-titled debut album. How was that all put together, including the single "You Make Me Want to Be"?
Well, we actually, at that point, I'd left RCA, and Matt McCauley, who's a kid I grew up with in Don Mills, was a very, very talented musician, and his father was a renowned orchestrator. And so they actually invested in my first bunch of records, and so we made that first record on Matt's family's money for about $20,000, and then proceeded to sell that record around the world in virtually every territory.
Barry Mann is a really good friend of mine throughout the years, and I had no idea that he assisted you on the music for the hit single "Sometimes When We Touch," which became #1 in Canada and a top 5 hit here in America. And I know you wrote the lyrics to that, correct?
That's right.
Okay, and how did that song come about, Dan?
I was really, really in love with an older woman when I was 19 and she was 22. She was much more sophisticated and mature than I, and always made me feel as though she liked me, that there were always other guys that had more money, had bigger muscles, were cooler, and that I was made to feel very inadequate. And I thought the only way I could really impress this woman was to write a song that would absolutely stun her. So she would always ask me if I loved her. So I started this song with "You Ask Me If I Love You," and I choke on my reply, and then proceeded to write out a whole version of "Sometimes When We Touch" and play it to her over the phone.
Wow, that's great. And it became a top 5 hit.
Yes.
And a #1. And,
yes.
and the tune "Sometimes When We Touch" led to more TV appearances for you, including the Merv Griffin show, the Michael Douglas show here in America. And what was that experience like for you, being only about 21 years of age at that time?
It was intense and surreal, and sometimes being young makes you less anxious. You don't think about all the things that can go wrong and the consequences when you're young, unlike when you get older. The other thing is, back then, as you remember, there weren't all the TV stations that there are now. There was no computer, no internet. So if you got on a show like Merv Griffin, you could be guaranteed that 25% of America would see you.
Right.
So it was unbelievable. The cause and effect of performing live on those shows and then seeing the recognition factor 24 hours later.
Another great song that you recorded in 1982 for the movie First Blood was a song called "It's a Long Road." How did your song get handpicked for that movie soundtrack?
Well, actually, that was an interesting story, because a week before I was married, the producers of First Blood called me and asked if I would sing the title song, which actually is the only song I didn't write. And so I was flown to London, England, to record this song with the warning that if I didn't nail the vocal in the first couple of days, I was just going to have to miss the wedding. And I had no idea that, the First Blood or Rambo movies would be so big.
Right.
So I sang the song. Luckily, I sang it well enough, that they were pleased with my performance, and then really thought nothing of it. And then all of a sudden, bam, Rambo or First Blood became the second biggest movie of the year after E.T., and the song itself, or the record, went on to be a really, really big hit in international markets.
In 1987, you were graced with the number one Billboard AC record of the year with the beautiful hit with Vonda Shepard called Can't We Try. What's the background on that amazing song?
Well, a few different things. One is that I wrote the song because I had actually, based on a video I had been in a couple of years before, and my wife, because videos were a whole new thing back then, my wife was very upset that I had to do a bedroom scene in the video with a model, and so I could hear her complaining about me to her friends that weren't in the music business and didn't understand that this was just a part of doing work on the phone. So she had kicked me out of the bedroom, so I wrote Can't We Try, and I literally put in, as I was hearing her complain about me, I hear you on the telephone to God knows who, spilling out your heart for free. And then what happened is, again, so it was a real life story. And then I had a hell of a time finding a female singer that could match my passion and emotion and honesty for the female part of the song. We were just about to give up on the song when at the very last second, my very last day of recording, Vonda Shepard literally cycled into my studio in Santa Monica. She was 22 years of age, and in her bike shorts, just walked into the studio and absolutely nailed Can't We Try in 3 takes. It was almost like a miracle. That someone could have walked in out of the blue like that and sung such a difficult song so beautifully.
That is awesome. And the follow-up to the song Can't We Try was another great tune called Never Thought That I Could Love.
Yeah, I wrote that actually about my mom, because my mom had been very sick and was in the hospital, and I had come to visit her in the psychiatric ward where she was staying because she was suffering from bipolar illness. There was a piano, and so I was so hard for me to see her sick that I was afraid if I talked to her I would just break down. So instead I would take her into the piano room and play her music on the piano. And as she was sitting beside me on the piano bench, I Never Thought That I Could Love literally tumbled out of my fingers, and it was me coming to terms with the fact that I really loved my mom and I didn't want to lose her.
Dan, tell me about the great book that you have wrote titled I Am My Father's Son.
Well, when my dad died in 2003, I found that for the first time in my life I couldn't write songs, and that was unusual. And usually in times of great sadness or emotional crisis, the first thing I turn to is my guitar or piano. And when a week rolled by and I still couldn't write, it hit me that the only reason I've been writing songs all my life was not to get Celine Dion covers or to have hits,
right,
but to get my dad's attention and approval, because he always wanted me to be a scholar and never really approved of me being a musician.
Mm-hmm.
And now that he was no longer alive, I had no one left to impress. So what I did is I took all that energy and turned it into a book, and it would be a book about my life and my father's life, our struggles, how our different backgrounds growing up, played such a huge role in how we interacted as father and son.
Very interesting. And Dan, where can your fans pick up that book?
Well, it's out in HarperCollins, but they can also probably find out by just going to danhill.com.
And Dan, what else are you working on these days?
Well, I still write a lot of songs for other artists. I've written hits like I Do Cherish You for 98 Degrees, and I Promise You for the Backstreet Boys, and Seduces Me for Celine Dion, which won me a Grammy. So I constantly write songs for other artists as well as perform, and I'm always writing articles. And right now I'm putting together a book of short stories, which will come out soon.
Oh, very cool. Very nice. Okay. And if you would like more information on Dan Hill, you can always go to danhill.com. Mr. Dan Hill, thank you so much for being a part of the 80s Experience tonight. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely, my pleasure. Thank you.